Once again, good evening, everyone. Today's lecture is under our module of psychology, and it is a specific on communication skills. It is the fifth lecture on this module. We have had previous lectures, four of them from this module, and I guess you are following up very well. We shall have like around 10 lectures for this module. So this is the fifth, and it is communication skills for health workers. So without wasting time, uh, these are the let me okay. Uh, these are the lecture objectives for today that we are going to be following. One, to define terms used in communication skills. Two, to discuss the communication process. Three, effective communication and its importance and barriers in medical field. Four, key components of effective communication. Factors affecting doctor-patient relationship, and then strategies to improve the doctor-patient relationship. So those are objectives we want to achieve today. And to start with, those are the terms related to communication skills. One, communication skills, it is the ability to convey information effectively through verbal, non-verbal, and written means, as well as actively listen and understand others in various interpersonal interactions. Before we go further, communication is everywhere. And when it comes to us in the medical field, communication is paramount. How do you communicate with your clients? You get it, eh? Yeah. How do you interact with them? You see, communication is in various ways. Just like you have seen in this definition, we have the verbal, the non-verbal, and written. How are you communicating? Are you communicating verbally? How are you doing your verbal communication? It matters a lot to your clients. You get it? The patients, their caretakers, your fellow workmates. You get it? Then non-verbally, the signs you're showing, the signs you're using, the facial expressions on your face. You get it? Are they the ones related to your profession? Yeah, that's why communication skills is essential as far as the medical field is concerned. Then the communication as a process, it is that process of exchanging information, ideas, thoughts, or feelings between individuals or groups, and that is through the various means that we indicated above. Yeah, just exchanging information, that is the process of communication. Skills, communication skills is to ensure there is what we call communication, and then communication is that process of you exchanging information. Then the other term is active listening. This involves fully concentrating on what is being said, understand the message, and then respond thoughtfully to the speaker to ensure there is mutual understanding of what that speaker has said. In a medical field, we need active listening a lot as a doctor, because this patient is explaining to you why they have come to visit your health facility, what they have been feeling in the previous days, in the previous years. You get it? So you must pay attention to whatever they are saying, and then use that information uh, to interpret their conditions. And then other terms, we have effective communication, successful exchange of information between individuals or groups in a clear and concise manner, leading to mutual understanding. Effective communication is actually the goal of communication. Any communication must be effective. We are going to see how do you ensure effective. Um, Mr. Sam, actually, I request you mute the microphone. I don't know whether you can hear me, but the microphone actually is bringing some background noise. Okay, we shall proceed. I've said that the goal of communication is it must be effective communication. Any communication must be effective to ensure that something has been said. First of all, which language are you using? Does the person understand what you're saying? You get it. The way you're approaching, the type of words you're using, however much they understand that language, but languages have different jargons and other cases and other slogans. Are you using the words that that person can understand? When it comes to the medical field, are you speaking the other medical terms, the harsh ones, whereby the patient cannot understand them? Then there wouldn't be effective communication. You get it? So you need to regulate the way you communicate to your patients to ensure that they understand what you're saying and then they respond accordingly. The doctor-patient relationship, it is the unique and the complex interaction between a healthcare provider and a patient. This encompasses trust, communication, empathy, and mutual respect. Trust is given by the patient to you, the healthcare provider. Communication is between the two of you. Then empathy is given to the patient by you, the healthcare provider. And then mutual respect, equal respect between the two bodies. That is the healthcare provider and his or her patient. Then empathy is the ability to understand and share feelings of others. Empathy is very, very paramount in the healthcare field because if you don't try to feel what others are feeling, you might not serve them very well. Some people tend to just handle people the way they want in the medical field. Clients come around, they have issues. So you as a doctor, if you don't try to fit yourself in that patient, you might not actually attend to them with care. But the moment you put yourself in their shoes, that is literally in their shoes. The moment you do that, you'll serve them accordingly and as required. Okay. Those are the essential terms that we need. There are very many terms, but those are the essential ones that you might need to know as far as communication skills are concerned. Then we shall go straight to types of communication. There are four major types. However much there are other types, but we look at generally the four types of communication. Um, we have verbal communication, we have the non-verbal, the visual, and then the written communication. The verbal communication, you use a strong, confident speaking voice. You must be able to listen very well, active listening, avoid the filler words, and avoid the industry jargons when appropriate. Do not just, if you're speaking to someone, try to speak what they actually understand. You get it? Try to ensure that they can pick what you're saying. In the medical field specifically, the terms you're using, you're speaking of the lactobacilli, how they can be substituted, and then the patient undergoes bacteriovaginosis. But does your patient understand lactobacilli? You get it? Even if you tell them of bacteriovaginosis that came because of the replacement, they will not understand the term. So try to say something that they can actually understand. Non-verbal. Notice how your emotions feel physically. Be intentional about non-verbal communication and then mimic non-verbal communication you find effective. This comes so much on the way. Let's say you're calling that patient to come. You cannot just be so cruel in your communications. Just non-verbal. Try to mimic something that it really fits in the situation, in that current situation. Don't do any non-verbal communication because, for example, you feel like doing it. Let's say you want to communicate to your doctor that this patient has actually done some diarrhea on their beds, but you don't want the patient to get what you're saying. Therefore, you try to communicate in another way so you can tell how your patient will feel if you're trying to create some signs to tell your fellow health worker that the patient has done this and that. Whatever the patient will see you doing, it will not be good to them and they will lose trust. You shall have caused problems on your relationship with your patient. The other type is visual. Ask others before including visuals. You get it? Consider your audience. Who are you talking to? Who are you showing? I mean, who are you communicating with? Who are you showing what you are trying to present? What you are trying to indicate to them? Yes? Therefore, only use visuals if they add a value to your context. And for this case, you're in the medical field, use visuals that add value to the medical context. Make your visuals clear and then easy to understand. Do not just do anything because you want to communicate. And then when it comes to the written, we do a lot of writing in the medical field. You must ensure that your written communication is simple and do not rely on tone. And these written documents, they do not rely on tone. So someone reading it, it is just depending on their personalities. But for you, you cannot in any way try to show your tone, the tone you are writing in. However, make your written document simple in a proper handwriting. Use proper terms in your document. We do a lot of writing here in the medical field. You get it. So, take your time to review your written communications. Keep a file of writing that you find effective or enjoyable. And in the medical field, we need a lot of archiving, keeping your files. Whatever report you're writing on that patient, ensure that they have their patient files, and then you're keeping that information in their files. Um, those are the types. Then the communication process. Excuse me. Yes, the communication process. This includes the feedback. The sender, the message they are sending, and then a receiver. You get a sender, the message, and then a receiver. So the sender comes up with a message that is encoding and then sends that message. The message is then received, that is decoding by the receiver. And then the receiver will receive the message, understands it, and then gives feedback to the sender. And that is how the communication process is completed. However, in the due course, we have noise as an interrupter. Noise can interrupt the communication process. Right from it can interrupt the sender, that is the process of encoding. It can interrupt the very message that you are sending, and it can also interrupt the receiver in the process of decoding. Let's get the terms. So, you find out that the sender, that is the individual or group initiating the communication process. And how do they do it? By encoding the message. The message is the information, ideas, or emotions being transmitted by the sender. We are not just saying the message is not just the information, even the emotions, your facial expressions. You are trying to send a certain message. You're trying to configure a certain message to this receiver, to this person who is seeing what you're doing in your facial expressions. You're performing some signs, for example, with your hands, with your fingers, or with your entire body. This person who is seeing is the receiver, and those signs you're trying to perform, that is the message. So it is not just speaking the information or writing down a document. Then encoding, it is the process of converting the message into a symbolic form that can be communicated. In case you want to speak it out, that is encoding. In case you want to perform it by signs, facial expressions, that is all encoding. The channel, it is that medium through which the message is transmitted. For example, face to face, it can be written, it can be electronic, electronic, for example, electronic emails, yeah. Or electronic, it can also be via these social media platforms. That is also electronic communication. Written, you're trying to you write something down and then share it with someone. Then face to face, you're trying to speak to them, or you're trying to show them some signs and they are trying to understand what you're showing. The receiver, it is the individual or group for whom the message is intended. Um, then the process of decoding, it is the process by which the receiver interprets and understands the message. And that's how you will try to complete the communication process. The process of interpreting and then understanding that message, that is decoding. When it comes to feedback, it is the response or reaction provided by the receiver to the sender. Feedback is essential because it helps the sender to confirm whether the receiver actually understood the message that they conveyed to them. When it comes to noise, it is any interference or distortion that hinders the accurate transmission of the message. Like we saw in the flow diagram of communication, the sender can be affected by noise, the very message can be affected by noise, the receiver can also be affected by noise. Noise has very many types. It can be this usual noise, the audio noise, or it can also be the physical noise, physical distraction. Audio noise is what you hear. Let's say you wanted to hear a certain message, but because of the audio noise, it interrupts the way you're hearing this message. You cannot hear the message very well because of that audio noise. Physical noise, that those are the physical distractions that can distract the sender or the receiver. This hardens, this interferes with the communication process. And the other types of noise that can distract, so long as anything can distract the sender of the message, the very message, or the receiver of the message. And then a context, it is that situational factors that influence the communication process. For example, cultural norms, social dynamics, you get it. In such and such a culture, when you talk in a large tone, you're actually talking well. And then in the other culture, when you talk in a large tone, you are cruel. You get it? Yeah. So that's those are also cultural norms. Those are, in other words, those are the external factors. The contexts are the external factors that also influence the communication process. Okay. That is the communication process. Then, very, very important in the medical field here are the 5 C's of effective communication. We saw effective communication as a definition under the terms. And for this case, these are the 5 C's. In other words, these are the strategies to implement effective communication. Strategies to ensure that communication is effective. Number one, clarity. So clarity refers to the quality of being clear and easily understood by your audience. In other words, if you want to make communication effective, it must be clear. How should it be clear? Use a simple language that everyone can understand. Avoid jargons and then organize your thoughts logically. Logically in a way that one thought follows the other. Do not bring different thoughts in the same communication context. You get it? You want to talk about the way this patient is undergoing this, and then you want to bring your home based issues at that same context. So you'll make your patient not to understand what you're trying to tell them, and their communication is not effective, and also services have not been provided so well. The second C is coherency. This relates to the logical connection between ideas and the overall flow of the message. Yeah, logical connection between your ideas. One idea after the other. How are they connecting? You get it, eh? Yeah. Logical connection and also the overall flow of the message. It is essential. In other words, you must ensure that all your points are connected in a meaningful way. That is coherency. You can also call it connectivity. Okay. The third C is conciseness. It must be concise in a way that this emphasizes the importance of conveying information in a clear manner without unnecessary details or wordiness. Usually, when I'm lecturing in my lectures, you find out that I organize my work in a way that the next lecture is connected to the previous lecture, and also the succeeding lecture will also connect to my current lecture. You get it? Me, and also I don't put unnecessary wordings. Anything I need to put in my slides, I put it there. Something that I don't need it to, I leave it. Meaning I have communicated effectively to you, my students. Then the fourth C is consistency. Uh, Consistency involves ensuring that the message remains uniform in terms of tone, style, and the content throughout the communication process. Consistency. Do not start your lecture as if your communication as if you're quarreling. You get it? And then later, again, you're trying to be polite. Now, you confuse your audience, you confuse the receiver of your message in the context within which you're speaking to them. What should they take? You understand? So consistency is key, and when it comes to us in the medical field, it is very, very crucial. If you're talking about something very less scary, do not later again change your communication in a way that it appears not to be scary. Yet initially, you were indicating that someone should fear what they're actually going through. And then the 50C is credibility. This is crucial for establishing trust and then reliability in the communication. Someone will take your communication important if it is credible. This involves presenting accurate information supported by evidence expertise, and ethical considerations. Do not speak wrong information, in other words. And if it needs to be referred, please refer. Provide a reference to what you're saying. Usually in the medical field, you remember you need to build the trust between you and your patient. But remember, your patient has to trust what you're saying, and they cannot just trust it. You get it? Unless you try to indicate that what you're saying is actually correct, and it should also be accurate. In other words, you shouldn't speak something different when you're at the reception of the patient, and then later you speak again something different. That makes your patient to lose trust in what you're communicating to them. So you must ensure that you promote expertise, and also you must be ethical in your communication. And that's the fifth C of effective communication: credibility. Then benefits and barriers of effective communication. Whenever communication is effective in the health work, we have improved the patient outcomes. Your patients will take seriously what you're telling them, and therefore we shall have external factors improved. For example, adherence to treatment, compliance to the directions of the doctor, and other things in line with patient outcomes. They will rely on what you tell them, on your directions. Even if you tell them to come back the next day, they will, so long as your communication was effective. Then we have increased the patient satisfaction. Your patients will be satisfied with what you're telling them whenever it is effective. Whenever you have communicated in a language they understand, whenever you haven't used harsh terms. Then, effective communication has an enhanced teamwork among healthcare professionals. Healthcare professionals will collaborate so well whenever communication is effective. Then we shall also have reduced medical errors whenever you communicate, whenever you consult, where necessary before you perform certain procedure. If you collaborate so well with your fellow workmates in the healthcare provision, you will have reduced medical errors, and this comes along when the communication was actually effective. Then barriers to effective communication, language barriers, of course, ensure that you have now been allocated to a health facility that is not actually in your region, where the language they speak is not your mother tongue. Such language barriers will hinder effective communication. You try to communicate something to your patient, but they can't actually understand. Perhaps some of these patients do not know English. You get it? They can't speak English. They are raised up from rural areas. They didn't even go to school. So you try to speak English, they can't understand, and you can't also understand their local language. That's a barrier. The other barrier is cultural differences. You're being allocated in a different region, in a different culture that you're not actually used to. You get it. So you find out that in a culture that high tone means seriousness, for you try to use it, yet that is the point that you are not that much serious. You get it, and therefore it becomes a barrier to effective communication. Also, cultural differences also cause. Remember, each culture has its own norms and values and morals. Yeah. So you cannot communicate so well in a culture that you're not using its norms and values. Another barrier is hierarchical structures within healthcare organizations. This is a barrier in a way that you have to communicate in case you want to pass on a certain communication to the executive director of that health facility, but you are just a mere health worker. You cannot go directly to him and you want to communicate something, perhaps the way patients are feeling. You want to tell him something about the services being provided at the facility. However, since there is hierarchy in organizational structure, you have to pass through a certain administration levels to reach the executive director. You find out that by the time the communication reaches the director, it's not much essential. Most of these levels have all been trying to omit some steps. So these have such hierarchical structures in organizations also try to present a barrier to effective communication in healthcare. Then time constraints. Usually this is also a barrier in a way that some things are not available at the time they are urgently required. So you want to direct this patient to something, to certain procedure, but certain things that are required in that procedure are not available. You get it? Yeah. So time constraint also becomes a barrier in effective communication. Then key components in communication in health, key components of communication. These are very important, and therefore, as a health worker, you must ensure that you promote these components of communication. One, a clear and concise language. Use a simple language that everyone can understand. I think I've talked about language. Two, active listening. Listen actively to what the patients are saying and then try to interpret it according to what they have told you. Also, whenever it is essential that they also listen to you whenever you're saying something. In other words, let's not be there an argument or an immediate exchange of words. In other words, let communication be a half duplex, not full duplex. I don't know whether you know such examples of communication. Any other half duplex, one listens and then responds, and then in the other, and then as this person is responding, the other group also listens. In full duplex, everyone is talking at that very moment. You get it? So we don't have active listening. Empathy and compassion. I talked about this. As a health worker, you must promote empathy. Try to feel what your patients are feeling, and here you will try to help them out. Compassion helps in building trust and the mutual relationship between you